So if you're leading anything today, maybe a company, a community group, even just, a complex household, you probably feel like you're drowning.
Oh, absolutely. Drowning in data, drowning in endless emails and messages.
Exactly. And now with AI accelerating everything, well, traditional leadership approaches can feel outdated almost instantly, right?
It's that constant state of just reacting. That's what really crushes leaders now. You're hit with decision fatigue, information overload. Honestly, the last thing you need is another dense management theory book.
You need something clearer, more fundamental.
Distilled wisdom, really. Something timeless that actually cuts through all that noise.
And that is precisely what we aim for in this deep dive. We looked into a collection of sources analyzing these essential prophetic leadership principles, specifically from the life of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
Right. And the goal isn't just a history lesson. It's about pulling out those fundamental, repeatable strategies that work, especially now in our, well, chaotic, algorithm-driven world.
We really focus on what the sources kept highlighting as these three kind of non-negotiable pillars for sustained influence and harmony within a community or organization.
Yeah, it's a fascinating balancing act. It comes down to how you treat your time, how you tackle problems, and maybe the most critical piece, how you build and maintain relationships.
The core idea seems to be if you can get those three elements right, working together, you create this resilient, high-trust environment. Success isn't just luck then.
It becomes more intentional, sustainable.
So let's unpack that blueprint. And maybe the best place to start is with the one resource everyone, everywhere claims they don't have enough of: time.
Okay, so time. The way the sources frame this immediately takes it beyond just, productivity hacks or scheduling tricks.
Right, it's not just something you spend.
Exactly. It's presented as Amanah, which is a really profound concept. It means a trust, a stewardship, something valuable entrusted to you that you're accountable for.
I find that shift from spending time to investing time incredibly powerful. It reframes everything.
It does, because if you think of your time like an investment portfolio, every single action, every hour, becomes a choice about the potential return.
So if I waste, say, 2 hours just mindlessly scrolling social media, that's not just 2 hours gone.
Yeah.
In this framework, it's like a failed investment, isn't it? A poor use of my life's capital.
Precisely. And the sources bring up that key statement attributed to the prophet, peace be upon him. There are two blessings people often neglect: health and free time.
And in our modern world, free time too often just becomes distraction time.
We neglect it because we don't actively guard it or assign it a high-value purpose. It just sort of evaporates.
Okay, so how did this investment mindset translate into the prophet's actual daily routine? We sometimes imagine historical figures had simpler lives, but his responsibilities were immense.
Yeah, he was a spiritual guide, a military leader, a judge, a husband, a father, running a whole community.
So how did he juggle all that without burning out?
Well, the sources suggest the key was integration, not trying to rigidly separate every part of life into sealed boxes.
Ah.
It was a more holistic schedule, designed almost intentionally to avoid the kind of burnout and decision fatigue we see so much today. His time was deliberately segmented, but the segments flowed together.
How so?
There was dedicated time for worship, which provides that mental and spiritual grounding. Then family responsibilities nurturing those core relationships, which actually reduces stress elsewhere. Then specific times, often after morning or evening prayers, set aside for strategic thinking. And then, of course, community engagement, administration, judging disputes.
That integration makes so much sense functionally. Like, if you invest focused time in your family relationships, you might prevent problems that would otherwise spill over and demand your attention during your work time.
Exactly. It's efficiency through a holistic investment approach. The sources really emphasize that this wasn't accidental. There wasn't much drift in the routine. Each segment had an intended purpose, an expected return.
It's interesting how modern neuroscience kind of backs this up now, doesn't it? The idea of cycling between different types of focus, deep work, relational connection, spiritual reflection actually helps preserve mental energy.
Right. It keeps you sharper, clearer for decision-making. It prevents that cognitive drain.
Which brings us inevitably to the sort of dark side of modern time management, digital distraction.
The constant on culture.
And AI is just pouring fuel on that fire, isn't it? More notifications, more data streams demanding our attention.
The sources we looked at address this almost directly, even though they're ancient. They frame things like endless scrolling or constant notification checking as a form of, well, theft of life.
Wow, theft of life. That's strong language.
It's intentionally stark. The logic is, If your time is this precious currency entrusted to you, this Amanah, then anything that consumes it without giving a meaningful return, well, it's stealing from you. It's stealing your potential.
That really reframes the challenge for leaders today. If I'm meant to be doing deep strategic thinking for my team or organization, but I let constant pings and low-value digital tasks interrupt me, I'm not just being disorganized.
You're actively robbing the organization, in a sense.
Yeah.
Robbing it of the best, clearest thinking your brain could deliver. You're violating that trust, the Amanah of your focus.
So the implication for modern leaders, especially as AI starts handling more routine stuff,
Is that you have to become incredibly intentional, almost aggressive, about protecting your high-value, non-routine time. You need to build like a fortress around your schedule.
so actually blocking out time.
Rigorously.
Mm.
Scheduling and protecting chunks of time for deep work, for strategic planning, for genuine human connection, the things AI can't replicate. Because if you don't actively block it and defend it,
The digital noise will just flood in and consume it all.
exactly, it violates that core principle of time as a trust. You have to consciously decide what you will not do, which notifications get silenced, what low-return communication gets delegated.
It's about setting and defending boundaries to honor the value of your focus.
Yes. And that disciplined approach, that clarity you gain by minimizing the drift and protecting your focus, that's the essential foundation for making good decisions, especially under pressure.
Which leads us perfectly into the second pillar, problem solving.
Okay.
Okay, problem solving. Now, when you're facing really high-stakes challenges, maybe even existential threats, which was certainly the case, historically, you might expect a very top-down, centralized command structure.
Yeah.
One powerful leader making quick, decisive calls.
Right.
The strongman model.
But the primary method highlighted in our sources is actually consultation Shūrā.
Yes, and what's striking is how institutionalized it seems to have been. Shūrā wasn't just a nice suggestion, it was fundamental to the process.
So the leader actively sought out counsel.
Actively gathered his companions, laid out the problem, and genuinely listened to diverse perspectives before making a decision. The underlying principle was that any decision, especially in a crisis, is stronger if it's informed by collective wisdom rather than just one person's authority or, frankly, ego.
Okay, but let me push back on that a little, thinking about modern leadership. We're always told speed is everything. Doesn't relying on consultation, on Shūrā, inevitably slow things down? Couldn't that be disastrous in a fast-moving crisis, whether it's military or, say, corporate?
That's a really important tension. And it's true, speed matters. But the sources suggest the prophet, peace be upon him, wasn't paralyzed by Shūrā. He used it strategically.
How so?
The goal wasn't necessarily to reach universal consensus on every detail, which can be slow. It was about gathering the best information and perspectives quickly. Once that input was gathered, the decision itself could be swift and decisive.
Ah, I see. So it's not about endless debate, but efficient intelligence gathering.
Exactly. The core principle isn't just seeking advice. It's ensuring that the entire problem-solving process operates on two tracks simultaneously: collective wisdom and an unshakable inner calm. Panic, impulsive reactions, ego, those are the enemies of sound judgment in a crisis. Shūrā helps mitigate those.
That combination, collective wisdom feeding into calm, decisive action, makes sense. Let's look at a specific example. The sources often point to the Battle of Kandak, the Battle of the Trench, as a prime illustration.
Oh, it's a fantastic case study, especially for anyone thinking about innovation today. The situation was incredibly dire. Medina was facing this huge coalition army.
Vastly outnumbered.
Hugely. And the conventional military wisdom meeting them head-on out in the open would have been suicide. Just complete catastrophe.
So following the principle, they gathered for consultation for Shūrā. The collective wisdom quickly confirmed standard tactics wouldn't work. But what was the creative breakthrough?
It was this really radical, unconventional idea: dig a massive defensive trench around the most vulnerable approaches to the city.
A trench. In the Arabian Peninsula, that wasn't standard warfare practice there at all, was it?
Not at all. And what's crucial for leaders today is where that idea originated. It came from Salman al-Farisi, one of the companions.
Salman the Persian.
Exactly. He had experience with these kinds of defensive earthworks from his Persian background. It was a solution completely external to the traditional Arabian military thinking.
So the genius of the leadership there was really twofold. First, creating an environment where someone from a different background, a foreigner in a sense, felt safe and empowered enough to propose such a radical, non-traditional idea.
Psychological safety, we'd call it now.
And second, the leadership having the humility and the strategic insight to recognize the value of that idea and actually adopt it, even though it's foreign, and required this immense backbreaking effort from the entire community to dig it.
It's so directly applicable today. When your company or community faces a major market disruption or an existential threat, the game-changing solution often doesn't come from the usual suspects or the established ways of thinking.
All right, it comes from listening to the Salmons in your organization. Maybe the data scientists, the junior team members, the people on the fringes who see things differently.
Prophetic problem solving, in this sense, demands valuing effectiveness over just sticking to tradition or hierarchy, being open to the best idea, wherever it comes from.
Okay, but what about situations where there isn't an obvious creative fix? Or when circumstances force you into a negotiation, maybe a compromise that feels really damaging or unfair in the moment. How do you maintain that crucial calmness then?
That's where the sources point us to another famous and initially very difficult event, the Treaty of Hudaybiyah.
Ah, yes, the treaty with the Quraysh of Mecca.
Exactly. And on the surface, many of the terms seem deeply disadvantageous, even insulting to the Muslims.
It's like the clause about returning escapees.
Precisely. The treaty said any Meccan who fled persecution to join the Muslims in Medina had to be returned. But any Muslim who left Medina to go back to Mecca would not be sent back. It looked like a total capitulation, a one-sided deal.
I can just imagine the frustration among the companions. They traveled all that way with the intention of making the pilgrimage, the Umrah, and now they were being turned back and seemingly forced to accept these humiliating terms from their longtime oppressors.
The sources describe the frustration as intense, palpable. It reached a point where some were questioning the decision, almost mutinous. But this is where the Prophet's, peace be upon him, strategic patience really shone.
He held firm despite the pressure.
He held firm because he could see the bigger picture, the long-term strategic win that wasn't immediately obvious to everyone else.
Which was?
The core gain was a 10-year cessation of hostilities, a decade of peace. This peace treaty fundamentally shifted the political landscape. It forced the powerful Quraysh to recognize the Muslim community in Medina as equals, as a legitimate political entity they had to negotiate with.
And the peace itself created opportunities.
Huge opportunities, freedom of movement, freedom for the message of Islam to spread through conversation and interaction, not just conflict. It allowed people to travel, to talk, to engage without the constant threat of war. And ultimately, this period of peace led to a massive increase in people embracing Islam, far more than had been achieved through years of conflict.
So his ability to manage his own emotions and the intense emotions of his followers in that really difficult moment allowed for a strategic victory that wasn't obvious up front.
Exactly. It required incredible self-discipline and foresight, which, interestingly, circles right back to what we discussed about time management.
How so?
Well, you can't maintain that kind of strategic calm under extreme duress if your mind is constantly cluttered, if you're suffering from decision fatigue because you haven't protected your focus. That disciplined investment in time creates the mental space needed for wise, calm leadership in a crisis.
So the foundation of this problem-solving approach is really about seeking the most effective solution, even if it's unconventional, embracing collective wisdom, and then having the composure to see it through, even if it means navigating short-term frustration for long-term gain.
Beautifully put. And of course, the success of any strategy, no matter how brilliant, often hinges on the people executing it, on their trust, their buy-in, their commitment.
Which is the perfect transition to our third pillar, building and repairing relationships, or, as the sources sometimes frame it, the leadership of the heart.
Right. So if the first two pillars, time and problem solving, lean heavily on discipline and strategy, this third one is really about influence, loyalty, and connection.
The core idea here, as I understand it from the sources, is a fundamental shift in focus for leaders. It's less about managing projects or resources.
And much more about managing and nurturing hearts, building those deep connections. In today's terms, we talk about emotional intelligence, psychological safety, building relational capital. It's that human element.
So, moving beyond just management techniques into genuine human connection. How was this kind of foundational trust, this relational capital, established in that very early community in Medina?
It was established almost immediately after the Shūrā, the migration from Mecca. The key mechanism was the famous Brotherhood Pact, the Mu'aqqat.
This was the pairing up of the Muhajirin, the immigrants who arrived with nothing, and the Ansar, the helpers, already living in Medina.
Exactly. But it wasn't just a symbolic gesture like, welcome, let's be friends. It was far deeper, a really pragmatic, socioeconomic restructuring of the community.
Can you elaborate on the scope? We know they shared, but what did that practically mean?
The sources are clear. The Ansar didn't just offer temporary shelter, they formally, legally, structurally shared their wealth. They paired up families and literally divided their property, their land, their date orchards, their productive assets.
Wow. So it wasn't just charity, it was partnership, integration.
It was an absolutely unprecedented act of generosity and practical solidarity. It gave the Muhajirin, who had lost everything in Mecca, an immediate, stable economic footing, and integrated them fully into the community's fabric. It instantly welded two distinct groups into one cohesive, incredibly high-trust society.
That really sets the bar, doesn't it, for building trust capital? It shows that real trust isn't built on nice words or mission statements.
No, it's built on practical, tangible, demonstrable acts of mercy, fairness, and behavioral consistency. When people see that you're willing to share resources, share risk, stand by them in practical ways, that's what builds deep, resilient trust.
Which is so relevant for modern teams, especially if they're geographically distributed or maybe going through a merger or a difficult change. Leaders build trust when they show they're in it together, practically.
Absolutely. And conversely, if your actions are inconsistent with your words, or if the relationship feels purely transactional, that trust capital just evaporates. Consistency and genuine mercy, those are the high-yield investments for relational capital.
Okay, but relationships aren't always smooth sailing. They inevitably fray or even break. How does a leader shift from building trust to repairing it, especially after significant conflict or maybe even betrayal? The ultimate example here has to be the forgiveness shown after Fath Makkah, the conquest of Mecca.
Yes, that event is a true masterclass in strategic reconciliation. Think about the context. Years of intense persecution in Mecca, followed by exile, then numerous battles initiated by the Meccans against the nascent Muslim community.
So when Mecca was finally entered peacefully, the expectation based on the norms of time and, frankly, human nature would have been score-settling, retribution.
Massive vengeance, public humiliations, executions. That would have been the standard playbook. Instead, the Prophet, peace be upon him, declared a general amnesty. Go, you are free.
But wasn't there a risk in that? A risk that such sweeping forgiveness might be seen as weakness, maybe encouraging future defiance from others. How did he ensure that mercy translated into lasting loyalty, not contempt?
I think it worked because the mercy was so absolute, so unexpected, and so complete. It wasn't conditional. It was a profound psychological reset. Instead of trying to force compliance through fear, which is always brittle and requires constant enforcement, he secured loyalty through overwhelming compassion.
Disarmed them emotionally.
Completely. That single dramatic act neutralized the opposition almost overnight. It transformed former enemies, people who had actively fought against him, into followers, securing the long-term stability and unity of the community far more effectively and permanently than any campaign of retribution ever could have. The goal wasn't subjugation, it was genuine reconciliation.
And this focus on repair, on mending ties, wasn't just reserved for major events like the conquest, right? It extended even to more difficult, perhaps less central relationships, like with the Bedouin tribes on the periphery.
Yes, the sources highlight that managing relationships with the surrounding Bedouin tribes required constant, specific effort. These alliances were often shifting, complex, sometimes based more on pragmatism than deep loyalty.
So they weren't ignored or written off.
No, quite the opposite. They were actively and systematically nurtured. Mending fractured relationships or strengthening weak alliances with these groups required persistent outreach, trying to understand their often harsh circumstances, deep empathy, and making specific gestures to build bridges and demonstrate goodwill. It really underscores a key leadership principle. Your most challenging relationships often require the most deliberate, empathetic effort.
That's a powerful point.
Yeah.
And bringing this right into our world today, especially the digital realm, online conflict is so common, emotions get amplified, nuance just disappears. The sources we looked at seem to argue that in those situations, empathy is far more effective for repair than trying to win a logical argument.
Absolutely. Online arguments thrive on point scoring, on proving the other person wrong, but that just burns relational capital. It destroys trust.
No.
When trust has been damaged by a digital misunderstanding or a heated exchange online, trying to just pile on more facts or logic to win is usually pointless, even counterproductive. Leadership of the heart online means prioritizing the human connection over being right or winning the argument.
So maybe acknowledging the other person's feelings, even if you completely disagree with their point.
Exactly. Sometimes just saying, I can see why you feel frustrated, or I understand that perspective, even if you follow it with your own view, can be the only way to start rebuilding that connection. You have to restore the human link before any productive conversation can happen.
Okay, so we have these three incredibly powerful pillars. The discipline of time, treated as an investment, the clarity of problem solving fueled by collective wisdom and calm, and the resilient foundation of relationships built on consistency and mercy. The ultimate test, though, is how they work together. Not in isolation, but in sync.
Precisely. And to really see this synchronization in action, the sources often point to what is arguably the single most critical, high-stakes, complex event in the early history, the Hijra itself, the migration journey from Mecca to Medina.
Right. This wasn't some spontaneous dash for safety. The accounts depict it as an incredibly well-planned, meticulously executed operation under conditions of extreme danger.
A logistical masterpiece, really.
So let's break it down. How did those three pillars, time, problem-solving, relationships, align to make this incredibly risky journey successful?
Okay, let's start with time management with precision. The timing of the escape itself was critical.
They didn't just leave whenever.
No. The specific night was chosen carefully, coinciding with when the Quraysh leaders were distracted, finalizing their own plan to assassinate the Prophet, peace be upon him. Then, the decision to hide in the cave of Thar for 3 days.
That wasn't just hiding, was it?
It was a deliberate timing strategy. It allowed the initial intense heat of the pursuit to cool down. It let the search parties focus their main efforts on the standard northern routes out of Mecca, assuming they'd already gone that way. It bought crucial time.
That kind of timing required incredible foresight and planning. It was a calculated risk relying on strategic delay, precision movement, often under cover of darkness. That feels like it flows right into the problem-solving with strategic planning component.
Yes, the planning was incredibly intricate. It wasn't just about evading capture, it involved active counterintelligence.
How so?
Well, for instance, they hired a guide, Abdullah ibn Urayq. Crucially, he wasn't a Muslim at the time, but he was known for his integrity and, importantly, his expert knowledge of the lesser-known unconventional desert routes south and west, away from the main roads the pursuers would expect them to take.
Using unconventional resources and routes.
Exactly, and they set up sophisticated communication lines. Abdullah, the son of Abu Bakr, would spend his days in Mecca gathering intelligence on the search efforts, then sneak out to the cave at night to deliver updates. His sister, Asma, would bring food and supplies, also under cover of darkness. It was this decentralized network requiring flawless coordination and secrecy.
And none of that, the precise timing, the clever planning, the risk-taking, none of it could have possibly worked without the absolute bedrock of the third pillar, relationships in action.
Absolutely critical. The entire success hinged on a very small, deeply trusted, and incredibly committed team.
You have Abu Bakr's unwavering companionship, obviously, that core bond of trust.
The epitome of loyalty, but equally vital were those crucial support roles, which relied entirely on that deep relational capital. Think about Abdullah ibn Abi Bakr, just a young man risking his life every night to act as an intelligence courier.
And his sister, Asma, her role was immense.
Immense. Providing provisions, coordinating logistics, acting as that vital link between the hidden travelers and the city, all while operating right under the noses of the increasingly desperate Quraysh. Her courage, her discretion.
It demonstrates so clearly that strong leadership relies not just on competent followers, but on team members who are willing to put themselves in extreme danger precisely because of that absolute relational trust and commitment to the leader and the mission.
The Hijra journey really does crystallize the core argument of our sources. Genuine, lasting success happens when time discipline, that precision scheduling, problem-solving creativity, unconventional routes, counterintelligence using diverse skills, and strong, trust-based projects. Relationships, that committed support team, aren't just separate concepts, but function as a tightly integrated symbiotic system, all working together towards one clear strategic objective.
It's the ultimate case study in alignment. Okay, so now the crucial step. How do we take these timeless truths, this ancient wisdom, and translate it into a practical, actionable toolkit for you, the listener, the modern leader operating in today's high-speed AI-driven world? #Tag5. The modern leadership toolkit for the AI era.
Right, because the principles themselves are timeless, but how we apply them has to adapt to the realities of today, the speed, the technology, the unique pressures. We can definitely distill these into some clear, actionable mandates for leaders now.
Okay, let's start with time. If we truly accept time as Amanah, as that sacred trust, what are the concrete steps leaders need to implement today to combat that digital theft of life we talked about?
First off, I think mandatory time blocking becomes non-negotiable. Leaders need to establish and fiercely defend a rigorous schedule, and crucially, prioritize tasks not just by perceived urgency, the tyranny of the inbox, but by their actual return on investment for the mission.
So scheduling deep work, strategic thinking time.
Yes, and protecting it. That means instituting clear digital boundaries, turning off notifications during those high-focus blocks, maybe even implementing periods of digital fasting for the team or for yourself. And, importantly, leveraging technology smartly. Use AI and automation tools to handle the low-value, repetitive tasks. Free up your precious human focus for creativity, complex problem-solving, and relationship building, the things AI cannot do.
Okay, moving to problem solving. AI gives us incredible power for data analysis now. How do we avoid just becoming slaves to the algorithm? How do we effectively layer that prophetic wisdom, that Shūrā, onto the insights we get from predictive models?
You have to deliberately institutionalize consultation, Shūrā, but be crystal clear about its purpose in this new context. It's not just a feel-good brainstorming session anymore. It's the essential wisdom overlay on the data.
So combine the what's from AI with the why and how from people.
Precisely. Use AI for the heavy lifting on data analysis, the pattern recognition, the intelligence gathering aspect. But then you must bring in diverse human perspectives, your modern-day Salmons, to interpret that data, to question its assumptions, to consider the human impact.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Let's say an AI model flags a potential efficiency gain through a radical cost-cutting measure. Shūrā ensures you don't just act on the numbers. You consult with people who understand the potential impact on team morale, on customer relationships, on long-term strategic goals, the qualitative factors that pure data might miss. It's about blending data-driven insights with human-centric wisdom.
Got it. And finally, relationships. In a world where so much teamwork happens through screens, Slack channels, emails, how do leaders actively build and, when necessary, repair those hearts, that essential trust capital?
The absolute mandate here is an unrelenting focus on behavioral consistency and genuine mercy or empathy. It's simple, but hard. If your leadership talks about valuing work-life balance, but your actions consistently reward people for being online 24/7, you obliterate trust.
Actions speak louder than words.
Always. Build that trust capital through transparency, fairness, and predictable, consistent behavior that aligns with your stated values. And when conflict inevitably arises, especially online, get it off the digital platform as quickly as possible.
Move to a call, or ideally face-to-face if possible.
Yes. Engage with empathy first. Seek to understand before trying to be understood. Focus on reconciliation, on restoring the relationship, rather than winning the point or assigning blame. Because the digital space naturally depletes trust, only genuine human interaction can reliably replenish it.
There's a really crucial concluding thought in the source material here, a kind of mandate for leaders specifically in this age of AI. It argues that perhaps the highest calling for modern leadership is to actively work to humanize technology.
That's the ultimate synthesis, isn't it? As AI systems become more capable, more efficient, maybe even more intelligent in certain ways, the unique, irreplaceable value of the human leader becomes their capacity for empathy, for ethical judgment, for fostering genuine connection.
So it's about embedding our values into the tech.
Yes. We have to consciously integrate empathy into every technological process we design or implement. We need to audit our algorithms, our automated systems, asking, are they fair? What is their human impact? How do they affect relationships? If technology frees up our time from drudgery and helps solve logistical problems, which is a gift, then that reclaimed time must be reinvested into deepening human connections, mentoring, building community.
Not just reinvested into more tasks.
Exactly. If we simply allow the cold logic of efficiency, even AI-driven efficiency, to dictate how we interact and manage people, we fail that third pillar of relationships. And ultimately, we risk failing the future of human-centered organizations and communities.
Well, that really brings our deep dive together. We've explored how these core principles, discipline with time, strategic and calm problem solving, and compassion in relationships, all exemplified in the prophetic model, translate directly into what we might call the critical leadership currencies for navigating the 21st century.
Yeah, those three pillars: your time, your problem-solving ability, and your relational capital. The model really emphasizes balancing creativity in finding solutions, genuine compassion in how you connect with people, and that unwavering discipline in how you invest your focus and energy.
So the core responsibilities haven't fundamentally changed, even with all the new tech. Protect your time, solve problems wisely and collaboratively, and actively nurture the relationships that form the bedrock of everything.
That's the enduring blueprint.
So as you, our listener, reflect on all this, we want to leave you with 3 very specific audit questions. These are drawn directly from the reflection prompts in the source material we analyzed, designed for you to apply this knowledge immediately, practically.
Okay, first, take a really honest look at your past week. Where did your most valuable commodity, your time, actually slip away? Identify maybe the one biggest source of theft of life, whether it was digital distraction or something else, and make a concrete plan for how you'll eliminate or reduce it starting next week. Honor that Amanah.
Second, think about one current complex problem you're grappling with. Could be professional or personal. Now, identify one person or maybe one group whose perspective you haven't yet sought out, someone with potentially unconventional insights, your potential someone. Plan to actively consult them this week, looking for a more creative angle, just like at the Battle of the Trench.
And finally, number 3, identify one specific relationship in your life, could be personal, professional, maybe even a digital connection that feels strained or simply needs strengthening. Based on these principles of leadership of the heart, plan one specific, tangible, perhaps unexpected act of empathy, generosity, or consistency you can demonstrate towards that person this week. Start actively rebuilding or reinforcing that relational capital today.
Thank you so much for joining us on the deep dive. We hope this exploration has been valuable.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive, looking at different sources to help navigate our complex world.